We have a friend who is Catholic and asserts that only Catholic priests have the ability to read the Bible. Only priests have the ability to read the Bible. Could you please speak on this?
Yeah, I'd be glad to, Charlie. Obviously, anybody who can read the Bible. The implication, though, from your Catholic friend is that it's the Catholic priests, as representative of the Catholic Church, that get to authoritatively tell you what the Bible means. And that's the sense of it there. Now, there's a huge liability to this point of view. And I think this is easy to demonstrate with a few questions. All right. And my question to my Catholic friend who raised this point is, so give me an example. What are some, what are you familiar with any epistle, at least by name? An epistle is a letter. And this is the way Catholics refer to those letters in the New Testament, okay? Give me an example of an epistle, okay? Well, 1 Corinthians, all right? No, this is a letter, all right, that was written. Who was it written to? It was written to the Corinthians, all right? Next question. Here's a letter Paul wrote to the Corinthians. Right. Who read that letter? The Corinthians. That's who it was written to. Really? The Corinthians read the letter. Right. Were there any priests there in the Corinthian church? Now, of course, you see where I'm going with this. If the letters cannot be understood except by Roman Catholic priests, then even those people who originally received the letters would not be able to understand it without a priest there to tell them what it meant. That's following that logic. But of course, there were no priests there. There were no Roman Catholic priests in the sense that we think of it for hundreds of years. So who got to read the text from the apostle? Well, the people who the apostle wrote to. The apostle wrote to solve epistles in order to solve problems in local churches. So the epistle, the letter, was written in a plain enough sense so that the average Corinthian could make sense of it. Now, if the average Corinthian could make sense of it, how is it that we can't make sense of it? Now, we got to understand there are translation issues, and there are other concerns like that, cultural issues, etc. But that's not the issue we're facing here. Even a priest reading it now has to have an accurate translation, and it's got to be sensitive to the cultural issues. The question is, why is it that only an inside group of religious people have the capability of understanding a letter that was originally written to a bunch of ordinary folk, and the apostle expected them to understand it clearly, without theological degrees, without special qualifications? In fact, the New Testament letters were written in a kind of Greek called Koine Greek, Koine. It's not the Attic Greek, the High Greek of the classics. It's the Koine. It's the language of the common folk, because it was written for the common folk with the expectation that the common folk would understand it. Very simple, very straightforward. Okay? And so this is my response to that challenge. If this is true, then how could any New Testament Christian, any person in the first century or the second century or the third century, make sense of any of those epistles? They couldn't. And by the way, I don't know, I do understand the general concept of the Roman Church, that they kind of get the final say about what the doctrine taught in those epistles is supposed to be, how we're to take it. That's the teaching magisterium of the church, okay? But the fact is that they encourage Bible reading, ordinary folk reading the Bible. Now, why would they encourage their parishioners to read the Bible if it couldn't be understood by them? Indeed, I was raised Catholic, so I know about this. There are segments in every single Mass in which Scripture is read aloud. Okay, it's the passage for the day from the Gospels or the epistles. Okay, oftentimes those passages are not. I should say the priest isn't weighing in on that. It's part of the. It's part of the service proper. You know, it's part of the liturgy and the gospel. Boom, boom, boom. Then when they read that section, and then maybe something from the text of an epistle, and then they read that section. It isn't like, okay, here's what it's saying, and I'm the priest who's in charge here, and let me tell you what this means. No, they just read it. And there's an expectation, a proper one, an appropriate one, that when you read the gospel, the things that are written there have a plain sense to them that the ordinary listener in this case will understand. So taken at face value, this kind of claim by Roman Catholics, a Roman Catholic individual, is not even consistent with the practice of the church itself, because they read texts that they expect people to draw meaning from. Now, I understand the claim that even though ordinary folk can read the text and get good stuff out of it, the final authority as to what the text means lies with the church, and this is an authority claim they make. The teaching magisterium, or the Pope speaking from the chair, whatever. They're explaining these texts so you get a clear and proper sense of them. Ironically, there is debate even among Roman Catholic clergy about what some of these passages mean. So, and there certainly isn't a there isn't a book. They have the catechism, but there isn't a book that weighs in on every passage. If, as some people say, some Catholics have claimed, this is the way they put it, what good is an inspired text without an inspired interpretation? Okay, now, at first blush, that sounds like it makes sense. But keep in mind, any so-called inspired interpretation is itself just another inspired text. All right? This is a problem. Because if you say, okay, well, here's the text that's inspired. Now I'm going to give you another set of words that are the inspired interpretation of the text. Well, that's just another set of inspired words that need to be themselves interpreted. The point I'm making is you can never avoid the fact that at some point the ordinary individual has got to exercise an interpretive capability. Whether they're interpreting the inspired text or whether they're interpreting the inspired interpretation, which let's just call that the catechism, because there are also commentaries on the catechism, which is an interpretation of the interpretation. And then when you read the commentary, guess what you have to do? You have to make sense of what the commentary is saying and what it means. You still have to interpret it.